Well, that's taking out at Capitol Hill, where Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe is testifying before the House Task Force on the Trump attempted assassination. Let's listen.
President-elect Trump was wounded. A cowardly and despicable act killed one person and critically injured two others. And I join you and all Americans in condemning the horrific assault on President-elect Trump, Corey Comparator, James Copenhaver, and David Dutch. And I extend my deepest sympathies to the Comparator family. Since becoming acting director, I've worked tirelessly to address what I believe are shared goals with the task force, to understand what went wrong on the day of the attempted assassination, to ensure accountability, to prevent such a failure from ever happening again. The recently completed mission assurance inquiry thoroughly investigated the specific actions and inactions that led to the assassination attempt. 4 areas of deficiencies were identified: communications, protective advance processes, command and control processes, and coordination with external entities. The mission assurance inquiry identified failures by multiple employees that warrant disciplinary action. The quality of the advance work and preparation for the Butler Farm Show visit absolutely did not meet the expected standards of this agency. Let me be clear. There will be accountability, and that accountability is occurring. It is an extensive review that requires time to ensure due process. And the pace of this process, quite frankly, it does frustrate me. But it is essential that we recognize the gravity of our failure. I personally carry the weight of knowing that we almost lost a protectee, and our failure cost a father and husband his life. I have reflected extensively on the agency's substandard performance during the advance for the Butler rally. I have implemented numerous systemic and strategic changes to prevent these failures from ever happening again. It has been my singular focus to bring much-needed reform to the Secret Service, to be an agent of change, to challenge previous assumptions, and while doing so, also ensuring that the brave men and women of the Secret Service have the resources, leadership, and assets that they need to be successful in carrying out our protective mission. A full list of actions is itemized in my prepared testimony, but these changes have included providing the highest levels of Secret Service protection to President-elect Trump throughout the remainder of the presidential campaign, expanding the use of unmanned aerial systems for aerial observation at venues, expanding the use of counter-unmanned aerial systems technologies to mitigate the use of a UAS as a kinetic attack vector, expanding the use of ballistic countermeasures at Secret Service-protected campaign sites, a directive to mandate unified command in a singular location for all protective sites, something that was not done on July 13th in Butler. We are operating in a heightened threat environment with expanding protection requirements, and this requires a shift in the Secret Service's levels of protection, readiness, and sustainability. The paradigm shift focuses on elevating protection, prioritizing training, strengthening our workforce, and increasing accountability. The elevation of protective operations ties directly to how the work performed by special agents in the field directly relates to our protective mission. The field officers serve a critical role in everything we do operationally, to include protection, protective intelligence investigations, and enforcement operations, among many other important responsibilities. Recognizing how operationally integrated that field offices are, I'm directing an organizational change to shift the Office of Investigations to the Office of Field Operations. This is not simply a semantic change. Establishing the Office of Field Operations is an opportunity to reset our thinking and perspective about the role field offices play in protection, and to enhance our operational effectiveness by better leveraging field offices to support, enable, and inform protection and protective activities. It is also my intention to reconstitute the Secret Service's culture such that training is routine and expected. That was how it was done when I was operational in the Presidential Protective Division. And somehow along the way, we became disproportionately operational in comparison to time allocated for training. As I have publicly stated, the Secret Service historically has had to manage its operations by doing more with less. That is not consistent with achieving a no-fail mission. And since becoming acting director, I've made it my priority to eliminate the do more with less mindset, which has had a long-term degrading effect on our workforce and our protective operations. The Secret Service is making progress on this thanks to Congress. The continuing resolution, which was passed in September, appropriated additional funding to the Secret Service in FY 2025 to support immediate requirements associated with protective operations. I greatly appreciate the efforts of Congress and numerous staff members in making that supplemental a reality. The world is a dangerous place. The responsibilities of the Secret Service are critical to the national security of the United States. It is important that decision makers fully recognize and appreciate the vital role and significance of the Secret Service in our nation's security. The terrorist, the nation-state actor, the sniper, the lone gunman, the lone wolf gunman, they must be lucky once. But the men and women of the Secret Service must be perfect every time. That may not be fair, but that's the world in which we operate in. Thankfully, Congress has responded to the immediate challenges facing the Secret Service, and for that we are grateful. Our agency is not defined by one failure, but by our ability to learn from mistakes, to hold ourselves accountable, then learn, evolve, and continue striving for excellence. After the failure of July 13th, the dedicated men and women of the Secret Service rose to the occasion. In the face of immense pressure and adversity, they answered a call to duty with unwavering resolve. And I want to express my gratitude for the extraordinary dedication and hard work of our special agents, uniformed division officers, mission support personnel. They all persevered when the demands of the mission surpassed anything they or their families have ever been asked to take on. Their commitment to the mission, even under such challenging circumstances, is nothing short of inspiring. I am truly honored to serve alongside such a remarkable group of individuals. Mr. Chairman, I will submit the remainder of my statement for the record, and I look forward to answering the questions of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rowe. I'm now going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. First, I want to thank you for your testimony. Of all the areas the Secret Service reviewed after July 13th, what do you think was the most concerning failure of that day, looking back on it? And had you been the one developing the game plan, what different moves would you have made strategically to ensure that it was a safe and secure area?
So I think what is glaring to me is the failure to recognize the significance of the AGR building, to recognize the significance of proximity to what was perceived to be the middle perimeter of the site. The lack of recognizing that, the failure to effectively communicate, as you stated, and some of the findings of the task force, to effectively communicate to local law enforcement that we need to have uniformed presence out here, that we shouldn't have people that close, unscreened, on the curtilage of our site, not having better line of sight mitigation, having something scrim along that fence line that was to the 3 o'clock. Having uniformed law enforcement presence out there, having special attention measures by those law enforcement officers. That, to me, is glaring. And those are basic tenets, fundamentals of what advance teams are supposed to identify. They are supposed to identify hazards, risks, and then mitigate those risks effectively, either by using law enforcement and coordinating assets, or taking matters and making sure that it is mitigated and that risk is taken out of play. We did not do that on the 13th. Post-July 13th, there was a renewed focus on that, making sure that supervisors were engaged, that we provided assets, that we had enabling UAS, platforms in the air. That was the difference on October 5th that you saw with your own eyes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank you for your testimony. Of all the people that have weighed in on this, myself, my wife, 3 of my grandchildren, and 1 of my sons were there. I was on the grounds both on July 13th and October 5th. I want to reiterate what I said earlier. The difference is the difference between day and night. And my concern was, from the day the site was selected to when it was turned over to Secret Service, somehow that exchange, for whatever reason, the ability to coordinate the efforts between local law enforcement and federal agencies just seemed to be casual. I don't think local law enforcement knew enough about what was expected of them. I think that day they were doing what they thought they were supposed to do. And then afterwards, it's like, well, we should have communicated better. And I've got to tell you, from the beginning, I always was trying to figure out why 2 different command centers, and why weren't the 2 command centers even able to communicate with each other? Because at the end of the day, it's about communication. And as I've already said, we shouldn't have waited till 11 minutes after 6 that day to determine that we couldn't communicate. So going forward, you've already made some changes, and I think when you look at October the 5th, and to me, when I walked on the grounds that day, I felt like I was in the safest place in the world. The awareness of that, when you look back at it, and you were not in charge at that time on July 13th, but afterwards, the attention to detail that you put into effect on October the 5th, if you can share with us what we should do going forward, is there a protocol? Is there an ability to communicate? Is there an ability then to draw not only the federal agencies in, but also local agencies, because you can't cover the whole thing by yourselves. You just don't have enough personnel. You don't have enough assets. Going forward, I know you've already initiated plans like that. Just share a few of those with us, please.
Sure. So we've actually now we have done some organizational changes as well. I've created an aviation unit, right? So that's making sure that we're putting out those drones up in the sky to give us visibility. If we don't have a drone, or if for whatever reason a state or local wants to fly a drone, we're going to allow them to fly that drone as well.
All right, you've been watching Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe testifying before the House Task Force investigating the Trump assassination attempt. The committee will release its final report very, very soon. While this hearing is going on, let's get some context and bring in CBS News political reporter Taurean Small to talk about what we're seeing. So, Taurean, what more can we expect from the House Task Force when they issue that final report? What do we expect it to say?
Yeah, Vlad, we can expect a formal dressing down of this federal agency, similar to the interim report that the panel released in October. In it, they outline what they called strategic failures across the board, starting with communication, the lines of communication there. They feel that the agency just didn't adequately coordinate with local and state law enforcement, something that they typically do. But they said they outlined specifically one example of a local law enforcement police officer identifying the shooter at the July 13th Trump rally moments before he fired the first shot, and somehow that information never transferred or was able to be transported to the Trump Secret Service detail. So that's along the lines of what we're expecting, and as you heard there from that hearing, they're still looking for accountability and answers as to why that day happened the way it did, Vlad.
So can we expect to see changes in the force, in the Secret Service, in the wake of this final report, including a change at the top?
Yeah, as the acting director there laid out, and by the way, he is acting because shortly after that assassination attempt happened, the then director, Kimberly Cheadle, stepped down after calls for her resignation. But he says across the board, they're looking at improving those lines of communications. They have personnel working to develop a more sophisticated radio network that could improve some of those failures that they saw there. They're also have implemented an aviation part of the detail, whereas they could have drones that could monitor threats that could happen potentially out of the line of sight for the normal detail. And then ultimately, I think what the Trump campaign has been calling for was an increase in agents. The acting director said that there will be an increase in personnel, special agents to Trump's detail moving forward.
All right, Taurean Small for us this morning. Thank you very much.